Welcome to Tea Time with Shaylee and Amber. I'm Shaylee Evans, and I'm a life coach for pets and their people. I'm a truth seeker, and it's my passion to empower others and to give animals a voice along the way.
I'm Amber Leidick, and I've been a performance horse trainer focused on behavioral issues for over 20 years. My current passion is creating impactful in-person and online events and collaborating with professionals to be on the leading edge of positive change in the horse industry.
We are two friends invested in theta healing, belief system work, animal communication, and any resources that benefit human-animal partnerships. So turn up the volume and let's dive into the Great Awakening, brought to you by our horses. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have our sequel, our part 2, as promised, with Celeste Lazaris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're super excited to talk with you as always. So you have a lot of things going on in your life right now. Let's just dive in. Let's just start there. What's going on in your world?
What's going on? Well, we moved from Washington to Oregon, which was super cool because we had been loosely, I don't want to say like shopping for a facility, but we just knew, Danny and I knew that like Washington wasn't going to be home forever, and we could just feel it. Like it just kind of felt stagnant. And then when we would start thinking about like other places, like our bodies were like, yes, like anywhere but Washington, you should move. And we weren't sure what that meant. And so we had been, we travel a lot for clinics, which the cool thing is that every time we would travel somewhere, you could feel, I don't know if you guys have noticed this when you go places, but you'll go somewhere and your body will just feel better in like different states, or it'll feel worse or whatever. And it was interesting when I started traveling, when I would come back to Washington, I would notice all of a sudden that I actually kind of felt like crap in Washington. And I hadn't noticed because I was there for so long. But then I would leave and it was like my nervous system would get a break, or the environment being further away from cell towers. I don't know. Our air is not very clean in Washington either, at least where I was. So we started basically using that as parameters. So when we would travel, we would be like, what feels good where? And Southern Oregon, it was like as soon as I would start driving through and I'd hit Southern Oregon to Northern California, my entire body always felt really, really good. And Danny's did too. And so we're like, all right, that's one. Montana was another one that we were really hunting on. But I'm just kind of a wimp about the winters. And I just really didn't think that I could do it, unless I had like so much money, like so much money, and I could have like a heated indoor and heated everything with like heated floors, and everything in the facility was perfectly set up, and like the stall, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'd have to like really win the lottery on that one. That wasn't gonna happen. And then this property popped up. It wasn't on anything that we were searching for, and it was not really, we were actually looking at another house, and when they sent me the listing, I was just like, oh, it's smaller than what I want. It's 5 acres. And I was like, no, I really like wanted at least 20 or 30 because I want to be away from humans. I like to walk outside naked if I want to, and if you have neighbors, it's a little awkward when you do that. And they're like, just go check it out. And so we did, and we drove up, and it was wild. It was like we drove up and I was like, oh, this is ours, like 100%. And it's backed into like BLM hills. And so there's, even though it's 5 acres, there's nobody around us, and we're up on this hill and with a really long driveway. So we like overlook the city. So it feels like we're on just thousands of acres in the middle of nowhere, and it's super cool. And everything just worked out. Just like the universe does, right? Like you just kind of give it up and say, all right, what do you want to do? And it all worked out. And we moved in January 1st, or right before the new year. And then, so we've been here a little over 2 months. And then after the first week we were here, I started my next certification cohort for the nerve release group, which is going awesome, like really cool. I'm doing it with Catherine, which is fun. We decided to double up on that one. So she's helping teaching it with me. And then a month ago I broke my leg. So it's been interesting. I had a bunch of horses that were supposed to come in because I bought a facility so that I could go back to training full time. And I was really excited about that. And then that happened, and I was like, okay. And thankfully everybody was very gracious when I called them and I told them. Obviously there's not really anything I could do about that. It was not my ideal situation. And they're basically just like, hey, whenever you're healed, let me know. But it was a bummer for sure, because I was also working my own horses, and I was riding, and Milagro got to come and live with me finally. And And then I had to take a big step back. And then 2 weeks into the injury, just about, I started having really awful, well, I dislocated my leg and I broke it. And so a week in, the dislocation got resolved, which was awesome because that was actually what was really painful. But because of the significance of the dislocation and the break, I also had enough tearing and stagnation in my calf that I formed a blood clot. And they found that, thankfully, because it's in my left leg, and that's really scary. And Shaylee has listened to me have a few nervous breakdowns on a really bad day where I was just like, I feel like I have a ticking time bomb in my leg and I'm gonna leave my kids without a mother, and what the hell, like I'm finally like doing really well in life and I don't understand why this is happening to me. She had to talk me off a couple ledges, but that's on, so I'm on blood thinners for that and it's working really well, except not except for, it is working really well. The downside of that, though, is that the blood thinners, I have to be on them longer than what it would take for the fracture to heal. And if anybody's ever been on blood thinners or around it, you know that that means that I can't fly, so my wings are clipped. I can't ride, and I can't really do anything that could risk an injury, because if I accidentally hit my head, the effects of a brain bleed, it's just all really, really, really bad. So I'm grounded at home in a really beautiful place. And thankfully we have stunning pasture, so my horses can be out and they're happy. And my personal horses, thankfully, are very low maintenance in that, like, they don't have any crazy things. Like, they need a lot of like hands-on stuff. They're just kind of enjoying life and each other. But yeah, it's been interesting. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, and to just kind of circle back to, it's funny because I resonated with a couple things that you said, like when you were like, oh my gosh, my body feels different in like certain states. I was born and raised in New Mexico, and I would tell myself all the time that I loved going back to New Mexico. And the last couple of times I've been there, I've gotten so incredibly like sick with allergies. It's wild. It's like my body became allergic. I got my very first, speaking of being talked off ledges, like I called Amber the last time I was there. We went to like a trip and I was like, I'm dying. Like I'm having a full on asthma attack. I was like, can you talk to my body? Can you take me to the light? Like SOS, I need. And I ended up having to go to the emergency room and getting a
Holy crap.
freaking inhaler. Yeah, because it was like such, like
Like
I
really
literally
bad.
suffocated within my body. And then Justin just went back and he got super freaking sick with the sinus infection. And so I really think that there's a lot of validity to that. But
Yeah.
then also what I think is really cool about your Washington place and this new place is, remember we did the numerology for your farms, and like
Yeah.
your first farm numerology was like, this is a perfect starter farm and it's a place to grow a family and all this stuff. And then we were like curious and we did this new farm and it's like, this is where your business will flourish and this is where
Yeah.
you can like bring people together. And we were like, holy shit, that's so
It's so
fucking
perfect.
cool.
It was so perfect and so in alignment. And I was like, oh, good, 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 good. I'm glad that this is we're going.
Yeah, so awesome. Well, it sucks that you're kind of grounded at this point, but I know that I've been talking to you a little bit and you're feeling guided to kind of do different things online, and we don't have to go super in depth with that, but I know for what I think is really cool talking to you is you're like, damn it, I'm grounded. Okay, well, let's fly through energy work. We should talk about energy work and like get into that piece. So how has this like, well, first of all,
I
actually,
don't
because
fester very
you have,
long. I'm not wired for it.
I know you're totally,
I'm
well,
like,
and I'm
I'm allowed
curious
one
too.
day of a mental breakdown and then we're moving on.
Yeah. And you're talking about energy work. I know that you posted a little bit on Facebook on like, you're not even like washing your hair with shampoo anymore. You're like making your own stuff and like,
I know, look at all my
so
fluffy. It's so fluffy.
I know. It looks so good. And
Thanks.
I think it's super cool that you're in this space where, speaking of energy, like your energy is just totally changed. So do you think that that's really this space, or like how are you feeling about that?
I do think that it's part of the space. I think that it's also the intention that I set when I moved here. I mean, gosh, I've been in Washington, like I said, for like 17 years. That's a lot. You know, I had divorces. I had divorces. I had one. I have only two husbands. Felt like multiple though. But so Washington is where a lot of my abuse is from. And it's also where I felt like I had to scrap to like stay ahead in anything. Like it was like every time I would get ahead a little bit, something would set me back, and I like get ahead a little bit in like my life or career, and then like a bad relationship or a bad boss, or it was just this repetitive cycle of like I just couldn't quite ever get ahead. And thankfully, I'm scrappy, and like I said, like I'll give myself a very short amount of time and then I move on. But it just sucked, and I just felt like I was in survival mode all the time, everything that I did. And towards like the last couple of years, I really have been able to, and a lot of it I think is a testament to the work that we do too, but with the horses, is I was able to be like, okay, like you have to learn how to be in a receiving energy. You have to learn how to be in your feminine energy. You have to learn how to soften. And that was not something that I was ever allowed to be. And my mom was really in her feminine and really soft, but my mom also dealt with a lot of she abused narcotics and alcohol because of doctors, and it wasn't, like, I mean, she was really not set up for success. And in her generation, she very much believed in the like, I need to be married, and even if my husband's abusive, this is what we do. We're not of that generation. But so I perceived being a soft feminine woman as being a doormat. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be super rough. And I've always been a little bit feral and rough around the edges and scrappy. And growing up in Hawaii, you kind of have to be scrappy anyway. And so I think that really, and then I was into these, it was just I don't know if it was my soul contract or what, but it was just like my environment and the people around me and the choices that I made. And it was just this ricochet effect of, I was stuck in this really just survivalist mentality, and I loved it. And I loved that I was tough, and I loved that and I really liked that. And I liked that I wasn't approachable, and I liked that people didn't like me and they didn't want to come around me because that meant they wouldn't hurt me. And I had all of these ideals around like what was safe. And then as I like shifted my business and I got more into like the softening and the healing with the horses, which funny enough happened after I broke my arm, just same side of my body, for the record, your left side, which is your feminine side and the side that you hold on to trauma from the masculine. So I just find it very amusing that this is what's going on. Both of them are horse related. Neither of them were the horse's fault. So I just find like, it's just really funny, and it's not lost on me, just so we're clear. And so anyway, my life started softening. I also like was never allowed to have female friends, like, and when I say I wasn't allowed to, it was just like it didn't work out well, or the girls that I was around were really catty and backstabby, and I don't do that. So I only had guys as friends. And now it's like I have so many female friends and like so many beautiful relationships, but that's like slowly, and they're all, like you guys and Tara and Catherine and Ashley and Heather, and like we've got so many, it's such a beautiful circle of women. But we all kind of have like similar backgrounds. We're like, we all also were only friends with guys. And then all of a sudden we kind of found each other as we softened. And it's just really funny how it's all played out. But this is a very long-winded answer to your question. But essentially, I think that because of the mindfulness practices, both in like in the human realm, in like self-care and self-growth and energy work that we do with that, and then the work with the horses, I really, 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 really set a hard intention that when I moved into this place that I was going to come into it intentionally with wanting to really step into that like deep feminine energy and grounded, right? Like that really good grounded motherly energy. And I wanted to do away with a lot of the ideas. I don't know how to explain it. It was just like a new identity, but it's not really, because it's still me. Like I'm still very much me. Nothing has changed. Like my values hasn't changed and those things, but the way that I move through space, the way that I feel in my body, the way that I come across as people. And what's interesting to note about this is that when I moved here, okay, well, first of all, everybody here is really, really, really nice. Like it's very small town vibes. Like people are so kind. Like we blew a tire and Danny went and like got the no, I lied. Not blew a tire. What was it? Needed jumper cables and engine died. So I left the music running in the car. And so we had to go and like pick up jumper cables because we were out our little power box. And so Danny goes down and he like explains to the guys, like, we're like, take our money. We're coming down to purchase a thing. And the guy's like, oh, I'll just I'll just follow you home and jump you. Like, it's good. Like, you don't need to spend your money. And I'm like, who'd, like, nobody in Washington would do that. That's wild. But it's like that. Like everybody here is like that. They're all super sweet. And I came down here. It's really hard to get into vet clinics anywhere, small animal or horses. Nobody's taking on new patients because of the shortage. And they found out I moved down here, and a local vet came in and they sent me an email and they're like, hey, can we come over and meet you? We'd love to like talk about, you know, doing collaborations. Like maybe you can help us with some of our horses. We'd love to be the ones that come out and do x-rays and help yours. And like, it's just really like collaborative and kind and sweet. And I really feel like it's because and it's funny because when these interactions happen, I have to sit there and really, really work like so much self-work around like, what do you really want? What are you trying to get? Oh, you're trying to come into my house. Like it's there, like that straight side is just so there all the time. And I'm like, shut up. They're trying to be nice to you. Let them be nice to you. And I'm just like constantly having these. I sound like a crazy person, but it's real. So like I stepped into what I wanted so that I could attract what I wanted, and I'm getting what I want, but then I still have to actively work on receiving what it is that I attracted that I wanted. Does that make sense? Like it's really interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's so funny because I just had this conversation with like probably the last 3 sessions I've done have all been around there was somebody that we're working with that she really wanted to expand beyond what she's doing. So she's like, I don't identify with horse trainer. It's like the same story. Like, I don't identify as this thing. Like, what is it? And I was like, you're too far in now. You've already set the intention. You've told them.
Already done it.
So, you know, what you're going through right now is setting you up for what you're going to teach. So it was all around like, I'm getting my shit. I got to get my shit together. And I was like, you are in the process of that. But if you do not choose you repeatedly, nothing is going to be sustainable. And I feel like it's so interesting that all of us kind of live in that space where we still get to be super authentic and like, this is where I'm at. This is the shit that constantly goes on. I'm constantly getting in my head, but like how fast we can pull ourselves out of it is just testament to, I think, the connections that we can have now. Like you were saying, like, oh, now we have this beautiful circle of friends. And I was saying the transition from my stuff like 3 years ago to now is just because I am so strong around like who I'm gonna let in, but there's that like fine line of the wall versus the like discernment and the filter. Or
Yeah.
my first thing is always like, yeah, but like, but
Right.
are you gonna fuck me over? Or like
Yeah.
you're saying that now, but like so, and it's so interesting that you can. I think it's nice for people to hear that you can have that still, and like that's normal, but becoming aware of it and just being like, oh, that's there. Hold on, shh. Let's just wait and see.
Yeah.
Let's just wait and see what happens.
Yeah. I had a whole coaching call around it because I felt like the first time I had that, and I realized that I was just like, oh shit, like I'm not actually ready to like receive these things that I have been asking for. Like I can embody it and I can feel it in manifesting, and I know, and like I'm so clear on what I want and like who I am and all of those things. And then presented with a real life situation with another human. And I was like, nope, not ready. I in fact am not. And so I had a coaching call with my coach, and she's really good about like feminine energy and stuff. And she was actually the one that called me out on it originally years ago. Lovely, like I'm in a very kind way. But she was like, you know, everything that you work on with horses and like getting them into their receiving energy, don't you think that it's like a little bit hypocritical that you don't do the same? And I was like, no. I said, I'm receiving with the horses. And I was just like, yeah, but not with other humans. And you're literally asking them to open up and be receptive to humans, and you're not receptive to humans. So do you think maybe perhaps it's worth looking into? And I was like, God damn it. So I did.
That's
So
like
when I
the
called her
annoying.
about this, what she said was, to your point, she was like, well, she said, she said, you're a mom, she or you. She's like, you're a mom. You've been through a lot of stuff. You have had to overcome like unbelievable things, which I don't think people quite like understand just how much like it has taken us to get here. And she's like, you would literally, it would be dumb for you to not have that a little bit. She's like, it is good that you have that a little bit. You should always have that a little bit. She's like, and it's kind of like the difference between being able to ace all of your written exams and then struggling a little bit in the practical. She's like, that's normal. She's like, you're in your practicals right now. She's like, where you have the knowledge and you have the understanding, you can talk to yourself about it, but you do have to, in fact, put yourself in these situations and let people be nice to you and have that receptivity and let them take on this, or not take on this, but let them, how did she say it? I'm so butchering this. She's so much better than I am about it, but essentially letting them see this version of you and that it's okay, and that being feminine and soft is not like you, like you'll always have the street back there, right? Like that's always going to be there to swoop in if you need it, but that it's actually safe for them to see that side of you, and it's okay, like you're okay, because you can, like, and what happens? So worst case scenario, you let somebody in, I create these relationships and I let them, you know, whatever, and they screw me over some way. What? It's not going to be anything worse than what we've already been through.
Yeah.
Right?
That
So
was the
it's
same
like,
exact
okay,
conversation I had. I was like, I don't know if it's like right or wrong, but I go straight. If I feel myself going into like this space where I'm putting a wall up, I'm always like, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's
yeah.
nothing that I like, okay. It like, it starts to become a thing where when you've done it and you know that I said that I've been single for a year and a half. And I think it goes into relationship in every way, whether it's business partnerships or partners
Mhm.
or friends or whatever, where it was like, I stopped and I actually went into relationship with my business, and I went into a
Mm.
relationship with Shaylee. And
Mhm.
and because it was this like business partnership where I knew I could avoid all of the other things, the work, by dating someone, but then it was all coming out with her. And because it was like it didn't matter, right? It was this like intimate partnership, and I
Yeah.
had been burned a couple times co-creating with people. So I was kind of like, oh, do I even want to do this? And like, granted, I knew in my
Mhm.
head for the last 4 years, all I've talked about is like, I want to just have all of these things with so many people. And I always would go straight to what's the worst that's going to happen. It's literally not going to be worse than anything that's already happened, and it's always fine. And so I knew what I
Catherine and
could
I went through that.
yeah, it's like I knew I could dive back into where can I go and fall back like to myself. I know I'll come here back to my business, back to my house, back to my own self and go, I'm always been fine. And every time it gets better. So it like kind of takes out when you're in those moments, it takes out the big like fear element of like, I'm not going to move forward. That's not even an option. I think when you get to the point where we all are, it's like those
Yeah, it's
things
not
come up.
even,
It's not something that's
no,
going to stop us from doing what we're going to do ever.
no.
It's just like, oh,
One
this
of
is a little
the
uncomfortable.
the interesting conversations that Catherine and I had, so when we started working together 4 years ago, and we and it was funny because we've both been screwed over, and we both tried to co-create with other people. Like we, like I think everybody kind of like, whether you have that tribal mentality, like you want to do that, like that is natural, but then you get screwed over or things happen, and then you lose the relationships because of like some whatever. And so we were very mindful about it. But then when those, I remember the first time something came up and we kind of had like a tiff or whatever, and then we both sat down and we were like, look, I will burn this entire business to the ground if it means not losing you. Like I care more about you in this relationship than I care about any of this. I'll go back to fucking retail. Like I don't care. I actually don't care. I love you. I care about this relationship, and we don't have to do any of this. Like this is what I choose. And it was really cool because we both, and we've had a few, we probably had like 3 or 4, and like not big deals, but like minor things. And the minute something comes up, both of us having to have the ability to like call the other one and be like, hey, yo, I choose you. Like ride or die. Like this is what we're doing regardless of this. So our worst case scenario is the business goes to the ground.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And for some reason that was really, really, really healing for us in an odd way, and then gave us permission to kind of keep going. And now, like I said, like I'm doing my biggest course with her, and Shay and I are talking about doing a co-creation. Amber, you and I have done co-creations and are continuing to. Tara and I are getting ready to launch a course this summer. Like, and it's all these big things that like, and they're all things I could do by myself. Like I could do it by myself. I could make more money that way. I could do, you know, whatever. And instead, I'm just like, I would really just rather do it with you guys. Like, I think it would be really fun. And the energy and the power of having like that sisterhood too, to like carry and like bounce people around is just super healing, super, super healing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's
I think
ability
it's
to,
really healing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's really healing to be able to just show up where you are in those moments
Mhm.
and be like, because me and Shaylee had we had a session with Denise and she put our charts together, and then it was so funny because I get into these modes where it's like, well, Mercury's retrograding, I'm ready to fucking pump some shit out, and I get like, to go.
Yeah.
And And then Shaylee's like, she started diving into Felicity's work and doing like the human design stuff. And it was like to be able to be in partnership with people and to be able to say like, I can't right now, or having someone not respond, or having to be able to just say like, this is where I'm at, and have it be heard and not taken personal, is literally like the biggest thing. Because I think before, ever in every relationship I've had, my biggest fear was saying something, hurting someone's feelings, or like having it being taken wrong. And now it's like I have all of these friendships and partnerships that when we're doing this stuff where it's like we can always just be like, oh fuck, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. And no one's gonna look at you and go, oh, you don't know what you're doing. They're like, no, no, no. Of course you know what you're doing. Hold on.
Yeah.
That's like the best, I think, most potent piece about finding the people and growing with them. It's because you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it figured out. But if you can be honest and be like, can you just hold space for me being a fucking mess right now? And everybody's like, yup.
Yep.
That's the best part. It's the
Yeah,
best part.
100%. We all can. And it's so good. And what's funny is like I've learned too through doing that with like all of like the friendships and the partner business stuff that I have. It also trickles down to our clients as well. And so it gives our clients permission to like be seen. And I had like such a rad weekend. We had Heather and everybody came up, and I had a couple, and there was a lot of things that would go on with the coaching with the woman where it was just like, you're allowed to not, like, we were working on transitions. Like I love teaching. I do love teaching. I never go into a lesson really with the intention, or the person thinks that like we're going to work on transitions, but we always end up working on transitions because it's where everybody screws up. And I was like, okay, we're going to go into the trot. And she goes into the trot, and like, she's riding Maze, and Maze's head comes up and her ears pin, and she's like, and she like kicks her into the trot. And I was like, so we're going to bring her back down on the walk. And I was like, what was that about? And she was like, well, like we're trotting. And I was like, not like that. And I just said, I was just like, I don't actually care if we ever trot in this lesson. I said, I care that the mare is in a receptive energy. I care that you're in a receptive energy. I care that both of you feel safe and calm and confident moving forward. So I apologize that I said trot and you went into boom trot, but it's like, that's the difference in the mentality, which I think is a really good segue to like what are the stuff that I want to talk about with the pillars, because this was like a follow-up to what we were playing with. And I was listening to your guys' podcast with Tara, and I've heard you, Shaylee, talk a little bit about like the Great Awakening and what you're hearing with the horses. And I'm just like, that's really funny, because these are all like threads that I'm chasing, but I'm chasing it more from like an anatomical history perspective. And I'm like, ooh, like this makes a lot of sense as to how this is all going to correlate into all of our being receptivity and soft. But this idea of trainer lens, or who we're supposed to be with the horses and how we're supposed to act with the horses versus like having a relationship, is wild to me. And it comes up in every single conversation. And even in that lesson, I was just like, we worked with her husband too on being soft, and he does a lot of stuff with Buck Brannaman, and he does a lot of like natural horsemanship things. And he was really struggling because a lot of that, one, Amber, you probably know this too, but like a lot of that stuff is like heavy circles, and you talk about having a relationship with the horse, but really you're trying to get the horse subservient. But nobody says that. Everybody talks about the relationship, but like really though, you're trying to get them subservient. And so it took like all weekend to really get this across, and Sassy had to teach him, and it was beautiful. And I got to watch his entire nervous system calm down, because his way of doing things didn't work with her, because she would escalate and get so violent. But when he would just see her, and when he would just be soft, and when he would read her and say, okay, now it's okay for me to touch you, now it's not, her entire body changed. And he was having these huge transformations with her, but his transformation in his own body was really cool, because he was like, I've never been able to just be enough, just being soft and being seen with a horse. And I was like, that's crazy. And it's like, I feel like I live in a little fishbowl anymore, because we have all of us and Catherine and Tara, and like the people that I talk to, like we all speak the same language. And even in a lot of the lessons that I've been doing, it's been people that are like in my courses already. So like they're already kind of there. And so to work with somebody from the public that wasn't like that at all. And I'm like, oh shit, like you're still in that old paradigm of like subserviency, and we're going to make the horse do things. And if you don't make the horse do something, then you're a failure as a human. Like it is a core failure for you if you don't get the horse to do this. And it's like, oh, that's still a thing. That's crazy. Yeah. And then Shaylee and I were talking all about this morning. So
Yeah, we were talking about that this morning because it's actually wild how sometimes, and this is like, so the Great Awakening is essentially what the horses are teaching me about a movement away from entitlement to another's body, emotional state, whatever the case may be. And I was talking with Celeste this morning and I was like, it's so crazy because like, I feel like a very intentional person. I try to put a lot of thought behind the things that I do with my horses. I very often don't ride them. I don't force them into into anything by my own standards. And yet, some days I'll work with Biggie and I will literally be standing next to him and waiting for him to like relax. And then just a quick example, like wait for him to relax and go into this intentional like space. He doesn't want to do it. We take a walk. I ask again. And there will be some days where and all I'm asking is for him to be able to be okay being next to me in a relaxed state of being. And he will say, "Is this for you or for me?" And then I'm like, "Oh, fuck. I don't know. Like, is it for me? Do I need you to be relaxed?" And then I'm like, and then it totally goes into that spiral of like,
Yep.
well, if you can't relax next to me, like, then it must be something wrong with me. And then what can I do to fix it? And then I talk about that with my clients all the time because instead of just allowing something to be and really hearing them and even just asking the question, like, is this ready to shift? Are you ready to do this? We forget that question a lot of the times and we go into fix it mode. I see this thing going on in your body or this or whatever. And it all comes down to the biggest lesson that I've been getting this last like 9 months, which is you don't know what's good for me because you are not me. So that's a big topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's tough, and it's like it's a hard thing for me to always correlate because, and so like we're talking about doing energy work, because there's not a horse that I work on or work with that I don't tune into. And so I don't really like I don't get into that like fix it lens. Like I just assume, so for everything for me, like even with the pillars, like it's an offering. So it's like, hey, you have a lot of shit going on in your body and they do need assistance getting out of it. Like that is a thing. Like we are supposed to be helping them through things to an extent, but it has to be like when they're ready and if they want to. But you're not doing it as in like a, okay, these are the things that you're going to do. It's more of a like, hey, I have this thing, can I show you? And then you tell me if you like it and you tell me if you want to play with it. And it's just this consistent offering of like basically me going to them on my knees and being like, I just want to see if this works. That's why every time like there's like this huge transformation, people are like, oh my God, like why do you look so surprised? I'm like, I'm always surprised. Half the time I always forget to take a before photo because in my head, I'm like, it's not going to make a big difference. I don't think that way ever. I'm just like, hey, I have this really cool stuff I'd like to show you. It might be a little bit tricky in the beginning to try to play with it or to like, if you have some concerns about your body or pain that you're trying to avoid or disassociate it, if I'm trying to bring you back into it. But it's just an offering consistently. Like that's just a huge conversation. But this, the idea around getting away from entitlement. So I have historical theories that I would like to throw at you guys that I have been learning about
Fun.
this. So horses, I think it's pretty well set that in this circle and in your guys' group, this is going to set well, but horses always come with us for, I don't want to say like serving society, but I do think that they come to us to serve us to an extent, and not in the way of like be servants, but like to teach us something, to do something. Like we would have been lost without them. Civilization would have been lost without them. Like none of us would be here if it weren't for the horse. I like fully believe that within my bones.
Yeah.
So reliance on the horse. So you think about like the horse in terms of like just in America. So just in America itself, you've got, it was basically just horses were taking care of everything, whether it's the natives, whether it's the Spaniards that came into here, and then we have immigrants that came over, horse-drawn carriages as horses. Horses did all of these things for us. And I think that maybe Shayla, you can tune into like past, like the dynamic and see what like the ancestors said. But I feel like, and I feel this way because I also work with Heather's horses, and Heather's horses are kind of like this too, in that like they understand that this is a job that puts food on the table, and they understand that this is actually a functional thing that they have to do. And they have a different amount of pride and ability to work with them. Like they don't feel necessarily, I don't think that they felt back then that we were being like entitled to them. It was like, this is something for us all to do. This is a choice that they are making to an extent. They didn't have those issues. Flash forward, so reliance on the horse declined a little bit from the late 1800s, like when trains started, but it really like didn't start declining until like 1930s to 1950s. That's not that long ago that we used them
Mhm.
literally for like the same horse had to take your kid to school that was plowing your fields that you might have to ride into war, right? Like, so those horses had a much different mentality than the horses that we have now that are just pets or commodities, or which is really it, right? Like that's the only reason why we have horses anymore. We don't have them because we have to. Now we're all horse poor because we have them, right? Like it's two different things. But so that hasn't that long ago. Only commissioned officers were allowed to compete horses in the Olympics, which was really the only like competition back then aside from jumping, but they were the only ones that were allowed to compete until 1952. So again, not that long ago. From about 1952 on, women started being able to compete in dressage first, and then it kind of went on from there. And then very quickly, women started being more of the domination in the sport because, well, we're awesome and we love horses and we started playing with this. Sharon May Davis, her one of the things that I find so fascinating about the work that she does that I don't think people realize unless you talk to her is that what she really does is she spends time digging up bones all around the world from all different stages. Like she's dug up like horses around the Neanderthal stage, right? Like she's looked at bones for hundreds and hundreds of years. And what she has traced is that missing nuchal lamella that the horses are suffering from only started after women started being the predominant riders.
Interesting.
Because women cannot manhandle. They were competed on by soldiers. You can manhandle them. The other horses, a lot of the time, were taught they had a lot of in-hand work because of plow driving. They had a lot of, I think, they didn't feel. It's a relationship work. Like if you ever watch Heather and some of these like actual cowboys, which are very few, work with our horses. The horses have a really deep sense of pride in knowing that like this is a job that I'm doing and this is my person and this is my business partner and I do everything with them. And like she even said, she's like, I've never done groundwork with any of my horses. You would not know that with the way that they track her and the way that they know everything that she's doing. It's just a different bond that they had when they're in service with their person. So then when we start breeding horses, the theory is, and I agree with it, is that because that's when women started taking over, women didn't have the strong handedness and they didn't have relationship building because they weren't doing much with them outside of competition. So now we started selecting horses that were easier to resist or not, they weren't capable to resist the hand as well, right? So from there, and again, and then when you look back in pictures too, so this is kind of getting a little bit more into biomechanics, but like you hear a lot of like the correct dressage betties and they're like, man, I had to, back then, like it didn't matter. And the horse's pole was always above the vertical and they were never behind the vertical. And it's like, yeah, because they had their lamellar attachments all the way down their neck. They only have it now from C1 to C4. Some of them have it at C5. It's gone. And a lot of the ones at C4 aren't super strong. So their strongest support system, if they don't have a sling, their only strong support system is at their pole. So everything about them is cranked in. That's their default. And we've bred that into them. And so we have people that are preaching these practices of the old classical masters who had horses that had full lamella on their neck, it was a much different way to train. They didn't have to be so specific. And they think that that's correct. And it is not correct for the modern sport horse, and not even sport horses, but all of them. There's not a single domesticated horse that she's found that has that in it. There are a few not prehistoric, what's the word? Not feral. There's a word has now left
Why do
my.
I not know how to help you? I don't know.
I know it's primitive. There are a few primitive
Oh.
breeds. Got it. That it's like feral, but it's not. There are a few primitive breeds that still have it, which is really cool. And they also don't ever come up with ECVM. And so what I find
Interesting.
fascinating around the Great Awakening and the history of the horse in America, I'll say America, but in civilization, is that when they were used in service with and a relationship with, and we valued them as like, we took care of them because they like, if our horse died, we were screwed. We didn't have transportation. We didn't have a way to get to the places that we were going. We couldn't do anything with, couldn't get medicine. Like our horses were it. So we had a really different relationship with them. We valued them in a different way. And then when that value started shifting, our breeding standards started shifting to all of a sudden, how can I make you more, or how can I make you less resistant to the hand? How can I make you more easy to manage? How can I make you more easy to manage so that I can have a competition goal instead? So we had a very big shift in how we have relationship with our horses. And I just, don't think that it's a coincidence that that was when we started having genetic anomalies in their body and what that's relating to in life now. And so the training practices and the reason why like the pillars and like what I do in terms of development, like not talking about anything other than like developing the body, the reason why it works so well and the reason why I'm so strict about this stuff is because if a horse does not have a functioning sling, they have to default to using the front of their body and the back of their body. They don't have the structural support. So like your serratus muscles, your trapezius, your deep muscles that we can still support, they almost serve as like I mean it's different, right, than your nuchal lamina, but it's similar in the structures and the placements of how it would support the body, and it's all we have left. Like it's literally all we have left to help support it. And so anyway, that's and you go back into the whole theory around like you need to deactivate, relax, whatever, your brachius phallicus to get the thoracic sling online. But you can't do that unless the horse chooses to, and unless you have a good relationship with the horse and they are willing to relax around you. So you have to actually rise as a horseman to activate the only part of their body that's still really able to support them as a riding horse that we have not destroyed yet. I don't think that's a coincidence. Just saying.
I don't think that's a coincidence either. And, I've talked about like just the Great Awakening in general, like all these things that the horses can come forward with, like laminitis, kissing spines. We learn how to like cut their ligaments. We learn how to put shoes on them and everything. When they come forward with a malformation or something that can't be put back together, that is the ultimate like power move away from
100%.
like entitlement. But what I think about when you say that is just I'm thinking about it from like an energetic perspective where you're talking about the relationship and how they were really valued, and then all of a sudden there's this shift into analyzing and judgment and how can I do this or that, and it's a total like closing and collapsing of the heart space essentially. Like when you think of the heart of the horse, even like race horses, like we think of like some of the famous race horses like leading with their hearts, having like actual enlarged hearts. From an energetic perspective, I feel like there's something so beautiful and strong about the heart of a horse. And that totally, I find horses more and more that kind of talk about that, like the closing of the heart space, the shield over the heart, the collapsing through the sling. And I feel like that probably is not a coincidence with that timeline as well. So yeah, that's really a fascinating conversation.
And when you see horses, like, I mean, this always gets me in a lot of trouble with the dressage people, but like I watched those videos of how they're ridden and what they do stuff, and I don't personally believe that a lot of that stuff was correct. And in terms of what I know to be correct in the horses that we have today, I didn't work on horses that had all of their sound structures. I have no idea what that feels like. That was before my time. But those training practices would not work on our horses today. But those horses, even though they weren't correct, and even though they were braced in the neck, and even though they had those issues, they still had functional slings, which I think was really interesting. And to your point of if they had an open heart space and they were in a different, they were just more open and strong and proud because they were doing something with their partner, they would carry themselves more in that way. This is being like super deflated. And I know that's getting more into, not that I'm not against energetics, but this would not go over well in the scientific communities that I have to present this stuff to. But it's that, but it's the same idea around like, it's so interesting that then all of a sudden we started having thoracic sling failure, and then we started having kissing spines, and now we have all kinds of weird stuff going on. And it's just, when are we going to start paying attention? When are we going to start being more mindful? When are we going to start going to the horses with an ask and looking at what we've done as a species to our horses and being like, hey, this isn't going to work anymore. And I'm super glad that like people are getting blown up on social media, and like the FBA is under it, it's kind of under attack really. And I don't know what the history of competitive dressage is going to look like. And the more of these genetic studies of ECVM come out, the more it's going to go down for a lot of the breeding that we have. I mean, they're breeding it left and right because of money. But when those studies actually get published and that stuff comes out, like it's going to be a really, like in another 10 to 20 years, it's going to be really interesting to see what the state of horses looks like, whether it's breeding or sport or what, I don't know. It's really wild. We're in like really interesting times right now.
Yeah, and the horses know it too. And I just think about it's just so it's interesting to me how like the truth and what you say like oh when I have to present this like some of the energy side of things like it wouldn't be necessarily always be well received or taken seriously
Mhm.
when we know how emotions affect our body like if your horse
And
is
yet, yeah,
consistently
I know. I
yeah
know.
like literally emotions will create a physiological change in the body it will affect the hormones and everything and when you're in constant stress like it's just and you think that that's not like the energy creating this it's like so interesting to me but I want to circle back just really briefly because Amber explained something to me like not too long ago that really resonated with me or it helped me like understand because I am totally one of those people that like will make it about me and I'm like I'm a failure can't get my horse into pillar one but when you talk about um giving the horse the choice, right? So, or suggesting. So, like, you're not saying you need to do this because I know what's best for you. You're giving them the tools and you're saying, um, I suggest you try this and see how it feels. Amber explained to me one time when I was in one of my meltdowns, that she's like, if you are going to suggest something like that, you kind of have to be able to hold space for the horse in whatever comes up. So, like, if they rear, if they do this, if they do that, like,
Right.
you
Yes.
have to be so neutral. That is a concept that I think is kind of lost on many because I'm like, I have a good relationship with my horse and like I don't understand why he feels a certain way but like it's so true if you don't have the ability to stay in that neutral space, regardless of what the horse does, is it even fair to ask them to go there? That's like that's
Nope.
a really big thing that I learned from her.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
on
no,
like
those are
a
things that go ahead.
just like on a bigger collective level, like even outside of the horse world, I think that's the shift that's happening in every space on the planet right now, where it's like it always comes back to, am I going to be triggered about this? Do I have my own story tied in this? We have a good relationship. The same thing with the last couple sessions. I'm like, whose perspective is that? What is a good relationship? And having these blanket statements, and so like breaking it down and being like, but what does a good relationship entail? And I think one of the first things that, like, I started to dabble in this stuff and I felt very alone because I was doing things just intuitively, but there was no anything behind it. I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know. Like, it feels like this
Mhm.
is what this is. And then there was one post that Celeste had put, and I don't think we had had, I think I had had a podcast with Tara, and she's like, we have to talk to Celeste. And you had posted something about you were working on a horse and they either had your sleeve or they had something. They were biting your hat. I
Had my
can't remember
hat.
what I
Yeah.
can't remember.
Oh,
And I
her
was,
He had
bracelet,
my
maybe.
no,
I was
it
holding
was,
his leg and he wouldn't let me touch his leg unless he had my hat in
mhm,
his mouth. And so I had a beanie on. And he would sit there and he'd hold my beanie and I would hold his leg. And we were in this very like again, not something that I would ever, I would never recommend people do
right.
half of the things that I do with a horse, but I've checked in with them enough to know, and I'm having this active conversation that was, I was like, I'm willing to be vulnerable for you. Like, I'm willing to let you put me in your mouth so that I can try to show you that I'm not going to take you past threshold. And you need to start doing this with your leg or it's going to keep getting worse. So if you want to get out of this pain, like I would like to help you with that. And I have some things that I can show you. And I promise that I will do everything within my power to never take you to threshold. And if I do, I'm so sorry. I will learn where your threshold is and I won't go back. But you can have me in your mouth so that if I ever fall out of this energy, you can snatch me up and throw me on the ground. And the owner was like, you are bananas. And I'm like, nope, that's fair is fair.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the
yeah.
conversation that people get lost on is that they immediately see it as, oh, that's a behavior that needs to be corrected. And it's like that whole separating, there's communication and there's bad behavior. And I think that's where it starts to, when people start to see this stuff and they want to do all the things, they want to do the pillar work and they want to even the communication and they want to do all this stuff, they don't realize that that is when you enter into that space when all of your stuff comes to the surface in your stories. And then
Mhm.
that's the time for your opportunity to go, wait a minute, like what have I, in my own perspective, in my own creation, that's something that I know for a fact that we all constantly ask ourselves, even with wherever we are. I'm constantly asking, wait a minute, like, is this actually what I think it is? Am I just speaking and saying it from a place of, no, I really want this to be the way it is, so I'm saying it? Or is it like, hold on, this is definitely my shit, and I'm maybe creating an entire experience around it to suit my needs, not on like a conscious level most of the time. But I think that the greatest part about horses taking their power back in that way is that they're leading everybody to this place. And I always tell people you have to take the nudges or you're going to get hit by the truck. Like, like you get these little opportunities, and then next thing you know, it's like you don't get a choice. You have to now.
Right.
And I feel like the horses are slowly doing that.
Yeah. I mean, and I just hope that we, as a collective, can kind of figure this out before it's too late. And it's, and to the point of breeding, like it's so wonderful. And that's why we've got people like Tara and Ashley who are doing, and I know there's others too, but that are doing these really mindful breeding practices, not only for structural soundness, but the fact that like they're throwing epigenetics at it, like their environment and, the parents getting all of their needs met and the foals getting all of their needs met. And so they're really supporting them from such a beautiful level. And then placing them with people that will honor that. I think that's really all we can do at this point to shift it, because a lot of that, what like the where it's going, it's already, it's lost. And I have ECVM horses that are doing really well, and I have ECVM horses that had to get put down. So I mean, it's interesting. When I did the dissection, I was talking to Pamela, and they're so good and knowledgeable about that. And one of the things I found curious, and so I'm really excited to do this course with Tara, because it's under saddle. But there was a group in Germany. It's the only other group that she had heard of other than me who had had success in rehabbing ECVM horses. So getting in horses that are presenting with these behaviors or presenting with these lameness issues, and then we take them in and we do work with them, and then the symptoms go away. Obviously the ECVM can't, because it is what it is. Like there's nothing you can do about that. But it's the question of if we can set the body up to support itself soundly so that it's not using its compensation patterns or using, lesser compensation patterns than maybe what it was. Can we avoid the nerve fire that the horse is dealing with? Can we avoid the imbalance that the horse is dealing with? Can we set them up to support them in this disability? And depending on the severity of it, yes, we can, because we're doing it. And so, but she'd found another group in Germany that was having the same success with the in-hand work. And she was like, that's really cool. But it never held under saddle. And I just sat there and I looked at her, and she was like, and I just didn't say anything for a minute. I just I'm like, I would like for you to like come to your own conclusion here. And then she said, but yours is holding under saddle. And I said, mine is holding under saddle. And she's like, because you're still honoring the principles under saddle. And I said, uh-huh. I said, the fact that the horses go under saddle does not mean like, and it's so interesting. And it happens that way all the time. Like we teach people these set of principles to like kind of live by, to honor the horse's body and their mind. And they'll be super good at it in hand, and then they get on their back and it just goes, it's completely like I have to design a completely other course around the under saddle stuff, because they will not, it goes out the window. Or they'll do it under saddle to an extent unless they go to like open a gate, or they go to do a pattern, or like there's something, like something will come up, and that, not ego, but that's that flip of, we just went from relationship to, and now I'm going to tell you what to do. And then it just goes out the window, and it's just so, it's fascinating to watch it. But I was like, yeah, it's because they hadn't figured out that it flips when, if the correct biomechanics work in hand, it would also work under saddle. And the only reason why it's not working under saddle is because you're no longer doing it under saddle, because you got handsy and you let things fall apart for the sake of riding the horse. And then you say that it doesn't work anymore, but that's not ultimately true, is it? And so it's just really, it's an interesting thing to play with.
How much of that do you think has to do with the person kind of being disconnected from their body? I'm just, and maybe not in all cases, but I've talked to you a bunch of times where I'm like, I can't even ride anymore. And you're like, dude, do you even know like where your left shoulder is in space? And I'm like, I don't know. And like, I've been doing like
Yeah.
dancing and doing all these novel movements and stuff. And I feel like even some of them, like even someone who is well intentioned, it's so interesting how your relationship with your own body will totally change things under saddle.
Oh, 100%. That's something that Tara, well, I mean, Catherine, especially because the way that her biomechanics, but Tara and I talk about it a lot from like a little bit of a different perspective in terms of like just like a movement and being in touch with your, again, with that feminine energy and take it or leave it. Like it's really important to have it. But yeah, people that lose that, it's really hard for them to also get in. Because to your point of, and even how we started, and I was like, yeah, like we're asking for the horses to be in receptive energy. But like if you're not even in receptive energy to your own body, that's going to be really hard. And it's, you know, and I say all these things and then it makes it sound like doing the pillars is completely, and like people are incapable of achieving them, and that's not true. Like we have people that are achieving it successfully all the time, but if you let it, it will really, really, really guide you down an interesting path of like, how do you feel in your body? Are you comfortable in your skin? And then how that translates to under saddle. So when I had rhythm, um, when you have a baby, your body turns into what I like to call an organ snow globe. Like there's just a giant gap of nothingness in your middle, and all of your organs are like smooshed around and not where they're supposed to be and floating around. And it's awful. Like it's just, you feel like a goddamn cartoon character. It's terrible. But you have no core, none, zero. And you don't realize how much of a core you have until you have a baby and it's not there anymore. And it was really interesting because I remember I got on a horse the first time I got on a horse to school them after I had her. And by schooling, I mean just like inviting them basically into like a receiving energy on the back. But when you don't have a core, you automatically get more grabby with your hands because you don't have a core. And so you're worried. And so you try to get snatchy. And I was like, to be so careful. And where I remember I pulled it, he was a really cool guy, but he was known for being doing airs above the ground when he spooked. So I was a little like on edge. But I was sitting on him and I was talking to him and I was like, look, dude, like please don't flap too big. Like I don't usually say that, but I don't know that I can honor the contract of not accidentally snatching you if you flap because I got nothing. And I'm like sending him these pictures of my Oregon snow globe. And he was a total gentleman about it. But what was interesting for me about that experience is I got to sit there and have one of those, like I'm always having conversations with myself like a crazy person. But I was like, how much do you believe in this work that you're talking about? Like, how much do you believe that you can do, that you can be a good horseman and be really soft and do these things only in a soft receiving energy? Because if you're armored up when you get on, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can be nice and soft because, I have a core. And so at the end of the day, like I can whip out all of these old tools that I need to just in case, right? There's always this like just in case. And so I feel really confident. So it allows me to be really soft because I have all of the old tools that Amber and I used for the last 20 years that were, maybe not great, but it worked, right? And then I couldn't use them anymore because I was broken at all. And I got to sit there and be like, okay, fair, 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 fair. I will rehab and I will ride and I will put myself into these what feels like very compromising situations, so that I can really ingrain what this feeling of softness feels like. And while I'm not going to ride right now while I have a blood clot because I'm not going to be like stupid, also because Danny wouldn't let me, like at all. It's the one time the one time you'll hear my husband say no is right now. But I am still going down there and I am still interacting with my horses and I'm doing things with them, and which is inherently putting me at risk to an extent, but I'm doing it knowing that like I'm putting myself only in softness. And if there was ever a time where things got escalated, I would just walk out and they're fine. But I don't know, it's really cool working with a disability, I guess is what I'm getting at, is it's like it has taught me that if you know your body and you're okay with being soft, you can always do it, even if you're not really comfortable in your body. Like you can do it. But you really got to sign that contract. Like really, really. And that's hard.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part of doing the collaborations because there's so many of these little pieces that go to it, and it's so fun to have you all there to be like, oh, like these little parts that are feel like they're like floating around. And I'm like, I haven't done a clinic by myself. Well, I did a couple last year, and I just found myself saying, you know who you need to check out, you know who you need to follow out, you know who you need to call and have a
I
session
don't
with.
like clinicking alone anymore. I hate it.
Oh,
I don't know that I'll do it again, actually.
yeah, and because
Yeah.
there's so many things, and like you can't possibly, because I think what happens for people that come in, like maybe the people that'll listen or the people that are just like finding any of the people's work, where it becomes this very overwhelming thing that totally happened to me where I was like, I can't do any of this. It's all too much. Like I have to be good in my body, and then I have to know the certain things to do with their body, and like I don't need all the parts and the pieces. And it was like, it's too much. But I
And a lot
feel
of times
like,
people, honest to God, just need to get on and go for a freaking trail ride. Like just
yeah,
go. Like just put the reins down, stop worrying about the biomechanics, stop worrying about everything, and
mhm,
just ride your horse.
yeah.
I feel
Just go
called
ride.
out right now.
Yeah, just go ride. Go get on your horse and go out ride. Like if I was like I sit here and I'm like, it is so beautiful and sunny, and my horses are right there, and all I want to do is just go for a trail ride. I just want to go and swing it bareback and drop the reins. Hell, don't throw a bridle on him. Just go lollygag around. Go sit on him in the pasture. Just go sit on your horse and let them graze and do stuff, and don't put anything on their face and just play. Okay, maybe not everybody should do that, but I do think that everybody should do that. Like, I think that at some point in your life, if you really, really, really want to be a horseman, you should just go and get on your horse, loose in their pasture, and just sit on them for like an
Have,
hour and
have you
let them
thought
graze.
have you let any of your horses work on your leg?
Um, Not like intentionally, but every time I go down there, Maze and Milagro are both like all over it,
Yeah,
especially Milagro.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just had
Mhm.
like a little vision of you sitting out in the pasture in a chair and having them like here. I also find it
Work
interesting
in
that
unison.
I have to be careful with him though, because he goes, oh, 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 thunk, and he's got like a big, like the bullfight he had. And I'm like, don't, you can't do that.
um
Don't do that.
that in the very beginning of the conversation you had said I'm stepping into, like there were so many things that you said.
I know. And then I broke my leg.
And it was like, and Shaylee and I were just saying about what we'll always say things, and she's like, but I don't actually need the thing to learn the thing. Oh, it was cancer. We kept talking about cancer because there's so much
Yeah.
cancer around. She's like, I don't need to know the lessons of cancer by getting cancer. I just needed the lessons. It's like
I'm
having
going to
this
be very specific about
yeah.
this situations, like specifically. Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
no, and that was what I was laughing about with the break, because when my arm broke, it was a very similar situation where I had made the intentional decision that I was going to quit my training business and I was going to move into this next chapter of my life. And then it was really, I mean, it was sucked because I lost a lot of clients, and I was getting shit on by my peers, and oh, she's just going to stop competing because she doesn't have what it takes, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I just know that I'm hurting horses and I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm not hurting, but definitely, I mean, like, but kind of, you know,
Hmm.
and it was really hard for me to go through that. And then because I broke my arm, I had like a really good excuse that I like couldn't do anything for 4 months, like at all. This compound fracture just right through my arm is
Hmm.
gorgeous. And it was such a blessing. It was so cool. And then when I did start working with them, it was really, I could be very mindful. And then I transitioned into being a body worker, and that was that. And it was just really cool. But it really helped me shift a lot of what was going on. And so, I'm not going to say that I'm grateful for my leg being broken. I think that that's really shitty, but I got infinitely angry. If anybody sees this podcast, the worst thing that you can say to me or anybody else that is in any way wired like me when shit like this happens is like, oh, it's just the universe telling you to slow down. I realize that I get more done in a day than the average muggle, but that's just because it's my life. Like, I'm not actually burning the candle at both ends. It just kind of looks that way, but I'm really not. Like, I have a really phenomenal work-life balance. But that's like everybody's like, they just want to be like, oh, it's just the universe's way of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I do. However, I have been through enough things that I know in my gut that like good things always come out of it if you let it to. And like to Shaylee's point of like, yeah, I've got all this shit going on. But then I'll be sitting here and I'm like, okay, but I totally have time now to like sit down and to like look at this course creation, and I can do it from an injured space, which means I'm automatically more vulnerable, which means I'm automatically more soft. So my lens is going to be a lot different because I'm coming at it from like a broken bird perspective versus like fierce Amazon warrior, right? Like just different lens. And I'm so excited about it. These two courses are going to be like the best thing ever. Like the best thing ever. So excited.
That feels complete. We're like, well,
Oh, wow. I don't know what else to
awesome.
say.
I didn't even know what time it was. I just realized that I was like, oh, we always get in a time warp. And I'm like, what time is it? What's happening? I just realized that we're like
What
on a
country
call
are
and
we
we're
in?
recording and we're like, like a total time lapse altogether.
In closing, we're all awesome and life is cool. And we should be focusing more on the art and relationship instead of, yeah, this is just all an art. Like horsemanship isn't art anymore. Like we don't have to ride them into war. We don't have to ride them to school. We're not doing anything with them. Like they don't like that. That's not a thing that needs to happen. They don't have to react. They don't have to be trained. They don't have to be these things. Like I think their lesson for us now is to teach us how to soften and how to hear and how to actually have good relationships. Because I'll tell you what, going in and having robots like running the world, like our sense of relationship is going to go out the window real quick if we don't start paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Definitely.
no,
Rocco,
Totally.
did you hear him? He always
Rocco, he's
Every-
ending the episode. He's so good.
oh good. He's like the episode's
Every
over.
single
Bye,
time.
guys.
Every
Yeah. Well, because we normally have an awkward goodbye, and then Rocco is Mr. Responsibility, and he just started stepping in and barking at the
Oh
end
no,
of every
Celeste is
episode.
frozen.
Oh no, she's frozen.
Like she's screaming. Oh, shit.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us, everybody.